When you're going to a Darul Uloom, you're going to a boarding school, and you're there for 6 years, you're like the programmist. So a guy who's becoming a programmer, he's not dealing with software. He's dealing with making code. Code is very boring.
Yes.
But code is what makes you all the softwares and all the chips and whatever else you want to make. I don't know what they make with it. But code is the main thing, right? All the AI, all that comes from the coding that you make, right? Now, there's two parts to this. The guy who's making the coding, he's quite boring, but he's the genius, right? When you're going for a 6-year course in ālim course, you're the coder. You're the person who's like the programmist, right? But you can't come into a masjid and a khutbah and give that.
No.
Because now you're in the software world. So you have to give it in a way that the public understand. The general public, they don't know about coding. They don't know. They'll switch off. If you saw them ones and zeros, they'll switch off straight away. So what are you going to do?
And now, in conversation with Lewisham Islamic Center.
Bismillah wa salatu salam ala Rasulillah. Alhamdulillah, we have with us Shaykh Hasan Ali, the founder of Safar Academy, and alhamdulillah, highly qualified in the field. And the Safar Academy being a curriculum which we benefit from here at Lewisham Islamic Center, amongst many other masajid and institutions. And Shaykh Hasan, if I can start by asking you to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into education with your own kind of journey in education.
So where do I start on this one? Well, born in the UK, went to normal schools. And then my father sent me to a boarding school at the age of 14.
MashaAllah.
So I finished my hifz there, then I did the full ālimiyya course. But I was in about 3 different madrasas over 9 years.
Okay.
By the time I graduated when I was about 23 years old. This was back in 1997, 98.
Inshallah. And that's in Sylhet, Sheikh.
So I started over here. So it's 8 years over here in this country.
Okay.
And then 1 year in Bangladesh.
Okay.
Sylhet, yeah.
Okay, mashallah.
And education, I mean, since I went to madrasa, it's all been about education.
Yeah.
And then when I sort of came out of the madrasa, I mean, while I was in madrasa, while I was in, one of my main teachers was Shaykh Fadl Rahim.
MashaAllah.
And he was saying that how in the Darul Uloom or in the madrasa, when you're in a boarding school, you're getting the cream of everything. You're getting you're getting the best of what you could ever get, right, in terms of learning Islam. And he had this concern that the general population out there, the 99% that don't send their children over to the boarding schools, Islamic boarding schools, how can they benefit from what's in the madrasa? So then he said, if we could take the cream of what we're learning and put it into a syllabus, and that syllabus could be the one that, tells the people about exactly what we, the best of what we are studying.
SubhanAllah. So it started back then.
So these are conversations that I would have in the 90s with the Sheikh. And he would tell me that, Hassan, when you do the syllabus, he said, most of the syllabus out there, he said, the fiqh is separate from the ahadith, and the ahadith. And what he explained is, he said, if you go back to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he embodied everything. So when he gave his Sahabi a teaching of how to pray, it wasn't just how to pray. It was how to pray with all the components, but also how to have the spirituality of prayer and how to have the khushu and the concentration. So here you got one teacher, but he's giving everything. He's giving you the fiqh here, he's giving you the spirituality here, he's giving you the words here, he's giving you everything but there's no separation. And anytime a Sahabi went to the Prophet ﷺ or Sahaba went to the Prophet ﷺ, it was a one package. Everything was in one package that was given to him. There's no separation. Now, the separation had to happen over a period of time. Why? Because it became too much for somebody to cover all of this. 23 years of prophethood, every day you got something revealed almost, whether it's Quran or whether it's Ahadith. And there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
Right? So then the scholars, they had to codify it. So when they codified, they slowly they had to separate. Okay, you go for your Nahw and Sarf or your Arabic language studies here, and then after that, when you've done that, then let's now, because there's now non-Arabs that are coming and joining in, and when you learn that, then you go and study this thing and then that thing, and then you come to Hadith here, you want Tafsir, you go over there, and so on. So over about 200 to 300 years, you had the Muslim world had now separated this for a necessity, if you like, because you just every field becomes like an expertise in itself. So what Shaykh Fadl Rahim was saying is that we need to have this syllabus where you bring back, where the student covers the fiqh, the hadith is there. Where they cover the hadith, you got the spirituality there. Where they're covering the spirituality, you've got the reasons why they're doing what they're doing.
A digestible meal.
So it's all together. So he said, like, there's books like later on Imam Ghazali's books, Shah Waliullah's books. They had books that would explain why Allah ordained certain things. So for their communities, because people want to know why we're doing this. Why is that, right? So he said, put it all together. So, and one of his other concerns was that these British children, because obviously he was in Britain, he said, these children won't simply just do as you tell them. So the time that he came from Pakistan, and the time that I even grew in Britain, I mean, in Britain is different, to be honest with you. But if you look at my sort of cultural background, my father's cultural background from Sylhet, and the year that I studied in my final year in Bangladesh, the institutes out there and the madaris out there, you don't really question much, all right? They just tell you what it is, you listen, you accept, you do, right? There's very few sort of questioning going on. So what Shaykh Fadl was saying is that the British children, and by that he means the Western kind of children, said they'll ask. And they will ask you for the reasons. And there are asrar al-ahkam. So asrar al-ahkam is the good hidden reasons why we do the very things that we do, Allah's told us to do. So he said, if you put that all together, then the student at one go, he'll get all of that. And then he'll be able to, do what. But then he told me, he goes, things that he said, like, for example, he said, if you ever look at anyone who practices Islam, he goes, you never start with the ahkam first. You don't start with the rulings. You don't just say do, don't. He said do's and don'ts. He said they come later on.
Yeah.
Because first you need to find the foundation is the belief in Allah, belief in the last day. And he would quote the hadith of man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, who believes in Allah and the last day.
Yeah.
He should do this. فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. He should say good or stay silent. So he said the foundation is this. So he said in the beginning books, he said put a lot of emphasis on the akhirah, about day of judgment, about life after death, about Allah, about aqidah, about Allah and all that. Put that. And even in aqidah, I mean, there's an interesting thing, because what happened later on is aqidah became a way of knowing whether somebody's on the truth or not by looking at people's beliefs. And it became like a very codified thing.
Yeah.
What do you say on this point? What is on that point? But what he said is, there's a difference between aqidah and imaniyat. So the Quran gives you aqidah from, but aqidah, if you really look at it over the 200 to 300 years as it started to formulate, it was done to say, you are not from my group, the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, because you don't share this belief that the Sahaba shared. That's how it was. So it was a way of saying you're excluded from the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. If you look at most of the Jahmis, the this, the that, right?
Yeah.
Mu'tazilis, whatever you want to say, right? It was a way of saying, okay, since you don't believe in this, you can't be from the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Whereas the Quran gives you things that prompt your iman, your belief. It's got nothing to do with codifying all that. I mean, it's all there if you really look in the background, but it's to do with, here you go, you're a human, you're reading the Quran, you should be, energized by this. This is Allah. Ala kulli shayin qadir. He has power of everything. He knows everything. He knows what's in the depth of your hearts. And so these ayats and so on are for a different purpose. So even when it comes to aqidah, there needs to be an emphasis on imaniyat, on prompting someone's iman, rather than getting them into the intricacies and then the divisions and so on. Yeah.
Shaykh, barakallahu feek. I mean, you've mentioned a lot, Shaykh, and everything you're saying, thinking, okay, there's something here, there's something to talk about. If I can go back to a few points. So the first one, if I go with the latter, you mentioned about the issue of aqidah, Shaykh, and the way that it was formulated and became a means of discerning who's upon what, etc. And something I've noticed, Shaykh, is in dealing with youth and in dealing with Muslims in general, is we may have individuals that understand the aqidah theoretically, But the problem is there is a lack of internalization, which leads to, for example, mental health issues. So anxiety, depression, OCDs, a lot of it, I believe, is rooted in a lack of internalization of the aqidah that this person believes in. If you believe Allah is, Al-Qadir ala kulli shay, or you believe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Razzaq, and this should kind of alleviate anxiety. Believing Allah is Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, it should remove this kind of overhyped focus on the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It should be balanced. Allah punishes, but Allah is merciful. But because of the conditioning that perhaps people receive from the way that sometimes teachers may teach Aqidah, it becomes very theoretical, very cold.
Yeah.
And the spirituality is completely stripped. Whereas what you were saying, Shaykh, is that in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides us with the fruit of the Aqidah rather than the seed of the Aqidah, not the sentence of Aqidah. It's more what you gain from it, subhanAllah.
Unless you study this on a good level from, shuyukh who have studied from others who've got a chain to the Prophet ﷺ.
Yeah.
It becomes, like you said, it becomes like mortar and bricks. It becomes like, you just, there's no sense of your ruh and your soul attaching. So let me give you an example, right? I mean, I said this recently, and I've been saying this in masajid, and I shock people when I say this. I say, guys, I just want to say to you, 100%, I haven't found it so far, but I just want to say to you guys that, and this is to a crowd in a masjid, right?
Yeah.
Allah has never promised victory for the Muslims. Look in the Quran, show me one verse in the Quran that Allah promised victory for the Muslims. And when you hear that, you're like, Sheikh lost it. Sheikh, he's losing it. I said, no, bro, Allah has promised victory for the believers. So now you have, Muslims. Okay, Muslimin and Mu'mineen, they've been very clear distinction between two. And then now you go into the Quran, go into Surah Hujurat, you see a group of Bedouins that came to the Prophet ﷺ, and they only just recently accepted Islam. So now the Sahaba have been with the Prophet ﷺ for how long? This is now almost 20 years. Some of them 15 years, some of them 10 years, right? And these Bedouins, when they accepted faith, they with the Sahaba, right? So you shoulders of shoulders with them, right? And then you say, Amanna, we are believers as well. And the Quran said, no, قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا. Quran said, oh Prophet, tell them not to say that we believed. Say, وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. Say that you've submitted to the faith. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Iman hasn't yet gone into the depths of your hearts. Now, what is the Quran doing here? The Quran is saying that, okay, you've now said the Shahada, that's a tongue thing. You've now doing your Salah, which is an outwardly thing you can measure. These are outwardly things, right? And then you go to the Hadith of Jibreel, which is in our book 7 and so on, and it's in book 2, I think, as well. But what it explains is that Deen, because that hadith is so amazing, right? Because at the end of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, ذَلِكُمْ جِبْرِيلٌ أَتَاكُمْ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. So that is Jibreel who came to teach you your deen, right? So now, so the word deen is used here, which is your religion. And then if you look at the hadith comprises mainly of three things, which is Islam, Iman, Ihsan, which means that the deen now comprises of all three, right? If you don't have all three, then you don't really have the full deen. So which is Islam, your outward thing, your Shahada, your Zakah, your Sawm, your Salah, your Hajj, whatever, the outward thing, right? And then the Iman, which is what you mentioned, like if you don't internalize all of this stuff, right? If you don't take it inside, then you really, then you have all these problems that you mentioned. So this is your Iman now. So when you say Al-Imanu Billahi, okay, in this hadith, it's just a word. Iman Billah. Well, subhanAllah, when you look at each one of these, right? Iman Billahi wa malaikati wa kutubi wa rusuli wa if you look at each one of these, they turn into an ocean, or they turn into a massive sea, right? So, Iman Billah, I believe in Allah. What does that mean? Now, what you just said there, that you got to then qualify it. Who is Allah? So then you qualify, name by name, attribute by attribute. Ar-Razaq. And when you hear Ar-Razaq, Allah is the provider. So then what do you do? But then, today I sit in a lesson with you, Shaykh, and I learned this. Okay, fine. But the real test is for me to go out in the real world. And then when I see that I'm not being provided, and then I say, no, he is a Razaq. And I push against that. No, he is a Razaq. He is a Razaq, right? That's where the real test is, not in the lesson, not with the book, not with the Aqidah book, right? So when you look at the Sahaba, what did they do? They learned sabr over 10 years, over 20 years. They didn't learn sabr in one lesson like, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu isbiru, oh believers, have sabr. Okay, that's an ayah. That's a concept. That's just telling you what to do. Concepts are just, codes that are given to your fine. But now you got to go into the real world and use them. So what's sabr in their world? In their world, when they got hunger, severe hunger, they're coming to the Prophet ﷺ and they're talking about hunger, and the Prophet ﷺ is saying sabr. Here's where the sabr really comes in. Like, come on. Yeah. They're saying, well, they're torturing us. They're against us. They're doing this. When you have Bilal radiallahu anhu and Khabbab, and they go to the Prophet ﷺ, hadith of Bukhari, in the shade of the Kaaba, Rasulullah is sitting there, and they say, they complain about the mushrikeen and the torture, and then the Prophet ﷺ says, it's just, have some, and they said, Ala tad'u alayhim, are you not going to curse them? And that's when the Prophet ﷺ says, you're being hasty. Which means that you need more sabr.
Yeah.
You need more patience. So this is real sort of patience. That each of these concepts takes time in the real world to actually digest and learn. And then, of course, you've got the Islam, you've got the Iman, right, internalized, and then finally you've got the Ihsan, which is Ihsan is a beautiful one, because Ihsan means now you're going to excel in all of these. So the way you got to look at it is. And I think our youth might understand this, right? When you're playing a game, or when you're in a sports, right? Do you just play the game just to play the game, or do you play the game to be a competitive person, right? So you give any of these kids, you give them PlayStation 5, Xbox, whatever. They sit there, they play to become really, they play like split-second master at moving those buttons, right? You look at football, you look at any of these, you got to get better and better. So Ihsan is now, with all the things that with Islam and Iman, now you got to excel. You got to go higher and deeper, higher and higher. You've got to really, be the best salah, best belief, best character, best work. So that's ihsan. And these three together, yu'allimukum dinakum, that's your deen.
Yeah.
Right? And it's unfortunate that we have a lot of Muslims out there, they just think, I've just accepted Islam, or I'm a Muslim, I've been a born Muslim for so long. Why isn't the help of Allah coming? Right? Hello. If you just you go to your deen, go to the Quran and now absorb things, then you see something different.
Sheikh, so I think everything you mentioned, I can tie it back to the kind of initial introduction that you gave us, which I think is quite significant. The relationship between yourself and your teacher, and the fact that you could perhaps suggest, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sheikh, that the kind of idea for the curriculum came from that conversation between yourself and your teacher, perhaps your teachers, and the importance of having a teacher who's also a murabbi, and can nurture, like you're saying, the Islam, the Iman, the Ihsan. So if we could just go back, Sheikh, and continue kind of listening to your educational journey. I understand you have a master's in educational psychology from the Institute of Education, and so you did your Alimiyya in Sylhet, alhamdulillah.
So basically, I went to Dewsbury first,
Okay,
and then there was a madrasa in Nottingham, run by Mullah Kamal. I was there. So Dewsbury, I was there for 4 years. Then I was in Nottingham for 4 years, and then for my final year, I went to Bangladesh.
Sure.
Now, Bangladesh was the studies of hadith in Bangladesh, but really my main education has been, when you say about the ilm and the knowledge, it's been from the first 8 years. But Bangladesh, I saw something different. Bangladesh, there are such sincere and ulama there that you could call them the awliya. They're people who represent and they embody this whole Torah, this whole, legacy, heritage that we've got inside. But Mullah Fadl Rahim, Shaykh Fadl Rahim, who's my teacher over here, he had that. He blew, and I think he blew me out. I think anyone who met him, he was amazing. I've actually got a whole talk about him on the internet.
Okay.
My greatest teacher, my greatest inspiration. Right.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave that for that.
We can link it.
But everything I'm explaining and a lot of the stuff that I put into the books is from the Shaykh, as in, the whole concept of how you're supposed to present to someone. As you were saying something about, you said something about, it's very unfortunate, sometimes you get a Muslim family and a Muslim child. Even I heard this, right, when I was growing up. They say, go and pray. If you don't pray, you're going to go to hellfire. Now, when you look into the Quran, you do find that in one verse. مَا سَلَكَكُمْ فِي سَقَرٍ قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. What brought you to hellfire? Oh, we never used to pray. It's true.
Yeah.
However, if you look in the rest of the Quran, wow, I mean, Allah saying to you, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu isbiru, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, ista'inu bis sabr wa salah. No, come and get your help from me through your salah. So it's like, you're going to do salah, you're going to get Allah's help. Now, where was that explained to kids?
It's a big incentive.
Yeah. Where was it? And then قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. Those believers are truly successful, who are devout in their prayers. And then there's 6 qualities mentioned. And then he says, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْوَارِثُونَ الَّذِينَ يَرِثُونَ الْفِرْدَوْسَ. Those people, they're going to be inheriting Firdaus, the highest place in Jannah. Who explained that to me as a kid? No one. Right?
Very positive.
So when I went to Shaykh Fadl Rahim, and he could see all that coming out of you, right? Because that's how you were conditioned. Then he would pop out a verse, and when you look at this verse, you think, what?
What was you being taught?
So let me tell you the verse. The verse right there, I think it's the end of the 5th juz or something. He says, مَا يَفْعَلُ اللَّهُ بِعَذَابِكُمْ إِن شَكَرْتُمْ وَآمَنْتُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ شَاكِرًا عَلِيمًا. Why would Allah want to punish you if you show true belief and if you show true gratitude? And Allah is very appreciative of what you do, and Allah is very knowledgeable. Now, when you look at that ayah on its own, you think, Allah is saying, I don't want to punish you. I just want you to believe. And one of the main things in that ayah is very, very crucial, which is shakartum, which is, when you do your salah, it's one of the biggest forms of shukr. And people don't look at it like that. When you do your salah, it's like, thank you, Allah. I put my head down on the ground. I thank you for everything you've given me. For the time I've still got, for the air I'm breathing, for, everything you provided, right? So it's really a shukr. When you put salah like that in front of kids or in front of adults or whoever, then you're motivated. Oh, okay. Then you add the ayah in Surah Muddathir. If you don't pray, then you go to hellfire, which is true.
Yeah.
But you don't want to make that the highlight, of everything.
Barakallah feekum, Sheikh.
Sheikh, I was going to ask, so in terms of the objective of Safar publications, what were the primary gaps in education that you saw probably in the UK that inspired you to say, okay, team, we need to start something, inshallah.
Okay. So what happened is that when I graduated and I became an imam in North London, masjid in North London, and what happened straight away is, okay, you get into the masjid, and I said, look, I want to teach kids, right? But then there was already a weekday thing going on there. So the chairman of the masjid said to me, just teach on the weekends. It's fine. So we just started. And straight away, when you start looking at the syllabus, we're now talking about almost 30 years ago. And you look at the syllabus at that time, you find massive gaps, huge gaps. I mean, number one, the syllabi, when you look at them, number one is that you find there's none of the books at that time were even typesetted properly, right? Forget that. Then you look at the contents. The contents, like one of the things would be, they say the story, but there's no morals of the story. Shaykh Fadl Rahim, he would say, whenever you narrate a story, he said, don't forget, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Allah narrates the whole of Yusuf's story. And right at the end of the surah, Allah says, لَقَدْ كَانَ, there is a ibrah, there is a lesson, there's a massive lesson. For those who really want to learn, for people of intelligence, Allah's kept this, right? And then in the beginning was لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي يُوسُفَ وَإِخْوَتِهِ آيَاتٌ لِلسَّائِلِينَ. So you're going to see loads of signs. So when Allah showed you all the signs about His miracles and whatever it is, at the end of it, Allah says, Ibrah. Now you're going to take the lessons. The lessons are that now you've heard the story. How does this relate to your life? The Quran says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anyone to take a lesson, take heed from these easy Quran, meaning that these story after story are like, why? Because it's the lessons, it's the morals that you live by. I think there's some really nonsensical people, I'm just going to call them, to be nice to them, right, who said that the Quran is outdated and Bible's outdated. Well, I mean, this is not why you read the Quran, that you've heard a story and that's it. Oh, I know the story now. You don't. You now carry that story with you for life. And you start looking at, okay, which story of the Prophet am I going to put in my life today and make my life better, make myself feel better, right? So anyhow, the gaps in the things that you're saying, I mean, there's all these gaps, right? You look at, you'll see that, okay, they've covered the content. Sometimes they're covering, I remember one syllable, right? They're covering everything according to what you see in a book of like Hidayah or Quduri or Nurul, which is a very fiqhi text, right? So it's giving you wudu, and then it's giving you different conditions of wudu, and then it's going to give you salah, and you got to, and it's all like, and you read that, okay, in an Alimiyah course, that's fine, you're going there. It's like, when you go into a Darul Ummah, you go into a boarding school, and you're there for 6 years, you're like the programmist. So a guy who's become a programmer, he's not dealing with software. He's dealing with making code. Code is very boring.
Yes.
But code is what makes you all the softwares and all the chips and whatever else you want to make. I don't know what they make with it. That's code is the main thing, right? All the AI and all that comes from the coding that you make, right? Now, there's two parts to this. The guy who's making the coding, he's quite boring, but he's the genius, right? When you're going for a 6-year course in Alim course, you're the coder. You're the person who's like the programmist, right? But you can't come into a masjid and a khutbah and give that.
No.
Because now you're in the software world. So you have to give it in a way that the public understand. Now, general public, they don't know about coding. They don't know. They'll switch off. If you saw them ones and zeros, they'll switch off straight away. So what you're going to do now you're going to give them something which is sweetened for them, right? It's the same Quran and Hadith, but you give a different face of it, right? So when you look at the syllabus, I picked up one and it was exactly what we would have covered in the madrasa. And I'm thinking, how would you see with kids like this?
Yeah.
Kids are going to get bored out of their head, man. And then I'm speaking to Shaykh Hasan Ali, and he's like, mix it all up. Give a bit of fiqh, and then give a bit of a story. Because the stories are sweet, fiqh and aqeedah are dry. And, you're going to lose the kids when you give fiqh and aqeedah, but when you give the story, you keep them going, right? So if you're looking at books, primary books, you actually see the way we've designed it is that there's always a story coming in between somewhere. Always, you do feel there's a story. And some people are like, why have you made the book like that? Well, we made it on purpose because we want you to, in the one lesson, tell them about fiqh, but then tell them a story. Because you're going to keep bringing the sweetness after they've felt a bit, they've had all the salt and they're feeling a bit dry, right? So you give the sweetness, and that keeps them going. So, so many different gaps. So, and then the thing was, look, we sat down and we said a number of times, look, we're gonna create something. We're gonna write something. But we started fi sabilillah, and I have a saying that anything you start fi sabilillah ends fi sabilillah. If you know what I'm trying to say, right? You bring a volunteer today. After a little while, he's gonna say he can say to you bye bye or salam alaikum to you and walk off. You can't say anything to him because you've got no contract that ties to him and so on. So we started, and then in the end, what happened is. I put proper pen to paper in about 2002. And then it was like a paid thing to get something done systematically. But then when you bring it all together, it's a huge task. Because you can write something, let's say you made it, you wrote a lesson, but then you take it to class and then you say to yourself, hang on a minute, I did write the lesson. Now, let's say, for example, you cooked something, right? But it depends on who's going to taste it now, right? Whether they like it or not. So kids, they always have a kids menu, right? In a restaurant. Why do they have a kids menu? Because kids don't like all your adult food, right? Yeah. They want their kiddie stuff. So you made the lesson. Now those kids are not buying it. As in they're not digesting it. So you have to go back again now. So you say, okay, this might be appropriate for age group, 10 or whatever, but it's not appropriate for age group 6. So we spent about 7 to 8 years.
Wow.
Right? Just writing all this stuff and then shifting and saying this works, that doesn't work, this works, that works, test this, retest again. And then there's so much stuff which is language, for example. I mean, right now with the books, right, we've got professional primary teachers that have gone through every single one of these books who've been teaching in primary school for about 10 years.
Shaykh, it sounds like real ihsan.
Well, we were doing our best, whatever we could do, right? So we had to get them to, because I can write it.
Yeah.
But how do I know if the primary schools children are going to be able to read it, right? So anyway, that's that. Then you got the content level. Then you got to put layers on, right? So he learns this, then he's going to learn that, then he's going to learn this. So it's all in our books. But what it is that it took several years. So if I put pen and paper 2002, I think by the time we got the color copies coming out, it was about 2013. So it's about 11 years, yeah. But in between there, what we did is we printed in-house, we used it in-house, we had black and white copies, we did all sorts of things. And then in the end, when we had to take it to a level where we now be giving out to the UK and the world, we had to then, make sure that it's tested and it was ready. So there's a lot in there.
Sheikh, a challenge that I kind of like might perceive. If you're kind of providing the curriculum in a manner which is a lot more digestible and different from that which the traditional student receives. The positives, of course, you explained, no doubt. But how do you then still keep the youth connected to their heritage? So, they kind of like, understand the contribution of the great scholars of the past. They understand what it means to, have a madhab and follow a madhab, and make sure that they don't kind of err off into, as you suggested, this person says, the Quran is outdated, or this person, because I think one of the benefits of traditional study, it provides you with that understanding of the general framework.
Okay, so it's a good thing, because what we also had to do,
Yeah.
and again from Shaykh Fadl himself, his the thing is that he said don't ignore the challenges that these students are going through in their real world, right? Because if you write as a bubble, if I wrote all of this in a bubble, okay, here's what we just need to teach them, and that's it. You're kind of not addressing the real audience, because they're outside your studying hours of 10 hours or 6 hours or 7 hours. They're in a world where they have the whole of the week where they're buzzing with every other thing that's going out there. So he said, when you're writing this, you have to add layers inside this of the modern world and whatever is going out there and the challenges that they're facing. So specifically, I remember he was saying, he said to me that, look at the schools. When the schools are teaching them kufr and disbelief through RE and RS, he said, just before that, he said, put something in the books so that they can counteract that, right? So one of the, I'll give you as an example, we put in book 6, because book 6 is like year 6, right? Which is like 10 years old, right? So they're going to soon go into secondary school. And already now they're going to get bombarded into this cosmological argument. Or let's just say, for example, in the RE lessons, they're going to say, does God exist? That's a common thing, right? And one of the key things they say is, seeing is believing, right? They keep on thinking that this is a central key thing of kufr and disbelief is, if you don't see it, you don't believe it. It's right. So what we did is we put in book 6, Sulaiman alayhi salam's story, and then went all the way to when he calls Bilqis, the Queen of Sheba, and then he gives her a test. And he says, walk, let's walk through here. Right? So he tells her to go in first, and she sees water in this room. Right? So she lifts her garment slightly, put her foot onto this, but then she realized it's not touched the water. She's confused. She realizes glass, and he put such glass on top of the water that she couldn't see the glass, but she was affected by the water that she could see. Straight away, at that moment in the Quran, she says, Rabbi inni aslamtu ma'a Sulaiman lillahi rabbil alamin. I've accepted, Islam, I've accepted faith. Now the thing is, why? Why did this woman do that at that point? Is because what Sulaiman alayhi salam was telling her is that you saw the sun in the sky, and that's the thing that you see. And because of that, you got affected and you start worshipping the sun. Kan ya'buduna, right? Min dunillahi ashams, right? They used to worship the sun besides Allah. And what you didn't see is the one who created the sun, but he's invisible. So she straight away with that test, she realized that I'm being affected by things that I can see, but I'm not looking at things I can't see. Like I'll give you an example. Right? You've seen loads of these videos probably. You have this really nice glass door that is polished clean. How many times people walk up to you and bang themselves straight into the door, right? Why do they do it? Because they can't see it. But it doesn't mean it's not there, right? So same thing is that God's there, but you don't see it. So there we put very clearly a lesson. Not all seeing is believing, and nobody who don't see something, you get it. Why? Because we're getting into that motion, right? The same. I remember Shaykh Fadl saying, he said, we're covering. He pointed a hadith in Bukhari in the beginning, and he said, why haven't any of the Islamic syllabi, why haven't they included this hadith? He said, this is the only hadith where you've got. And he said, why did Imam Bukhari include this hadith here? It's in our book 5, right? The whole thing is, he goes, here in this hadith, you've got 2 kafirs that are testifying to the truth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One kafir is Hirakl, right? And the other one is Abu Sufyan, who hadn't accepted Islam by then, right? So both of them are discussing this lecture that came to Hirakl, and he's asking so many questions. This Muhammad that has come amongst you, has he ever lied?
Yeah.
Has he ever done this? Has his fathers, said that they're prophets? Is he after wealth? Is he after this? Is he after that? And all the questions, in the end, he says, you know what? He goes, if everything you said is true, then I know that this man is going to take over everything. Like He's going to take over the kingdom that I'm in right now, and I own. And he said, if he was in front of me, I would have washed his feet and I would have drank the water from the wash, after washing his feet. Now, you see that hadith, right? And Shaykh Hasan said, why hasn't any Islamic syllabus put that in? Because he goes, this is the only one where you got the verification outside of Islam. Two Kafirs who are not in Islam, they're seeing the truth. One's a staunch enemy, like he's trying to kill the Prophet ﷺ, right? And another one just receives a letter. So we put that there because it boosts your iman that, wow, this is the truthfulness of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when you go back to what you're saying that, there's these gaps or whatever, you hit the nail on there that, yes, there are many gaps. And together, I mean, as a team, what we had to do is we had to then find and bring, all the collection of all these materials together. And then you got to put it in a way that is meaningful. And to come back to your thing, Chef, is if you go to these big bookstores, the book that sells the most in every single genre of the books they've got of let's say the non-fiction book, right? You know what book that is?
I'm going to take a guess.
Go on.
Something for dummies.
Yes, it's the Dummy's Guide.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually the Dummy's Guide.
Okay.
Right? Now, the question is, a lot of people might think, I don't want to pick up the Dummy's Guide. People think I'm a dummy. Now, why is the Dummy's Guide the most sold book? It's because they've watered it down so much that even the dummy can get it.
Okay.
Right? So one of the things we've done with this, right, it's not like a dummy guide, right? But it's watered down so much. You know what we found? We found a lot of adults are learning the Islamic books.
MashaAllah.
True.
And the reason is, their kids come home with the books. So one day they pick up the book and they read something. You just can just understand it. You just get it. You don't have to have like it's like a rocket
I
science.
think it's a selling point. You know why? Because I was speaking to Imam Shikar, I was saying, I think this could actually be taught to adults. When we have the adult classes, I really think that this will be digestible for them. Of course, with Lewisham, we have the predominance of new Muslims that are with us. And we see, even when it comes to the madrasa students, their parents, they read the books with them. So it's transparent. And this is one of the reasons actually why we took these books, is because it allows that transparency. So it was very, very good. I also wanted to add another point, is in regards to when you were mentioning, in regards to how you have structured the books. And I had a question that I had to ask you. When it comes to textbook 7 specifically, I've seen that you added something that I haven't seen in any of the Dar Salam books or any other books that we've had previously, is in regards to hygiene for the boys and the girls. So what inspired the team, inshallah, to put hygiene? And there's many others. And we just had them now. Crime also. There was crime.
Bring them one by one.
Okay,
let's so hygiene one, I'll tell you why. It's crazy. The time in the 80s when I was sent to a masjid, this is before I went to the boarding schools, right? I'm doing hifz in a masjid, right? I've been told to, I'm just like memorizing a book in hifz. Maybe the Quran in hifz, right? I'm memorizing this book here, the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, I'm trying, I actually did the hifz when I went to the madrasa, but I've started already. I'm in this masjid. Throughout all those years, there was no one that ever talked about hygiene and the points that you've got. It's so important. In a hadith, it says that if you don't remove certain hairs that you have, then your salah's not accepted, right?
Can I just ask you just to clarify what you mean by hygiene for people that haven't read the book? Like, just briefly.
We're talking, we don't want to, we want to keep this, PG or, so we're talking about...
the standards.
So look, in that book, right, if you cover it, there's a whole thing about relationship of female and male.
Okay.
There's that there. But there's also male on its own. How do you keep hygiene of your body?
Yes.
Right? So, okay, fine. We all know you go to the shower and you have your, you have your soap and shampoo and towel, right? But it's not just that. In Islamically, you say something called ghusl, and which is there's a ritual bath that you have to go through. And not only that, but then there's certain unwanted hairs you have to get rid of, right? So let's just leave it at that. Nobody explained that to me, right? And I was already 14 by the time I left to go to madrasa. And then then I find out at that age, I'm like, what? Like, what's going on here? Because again, no syllabi is actually addressing it. And this is so, you've got kids that are growing up. How do you not make this a very important part for them to know? Because it's part of them growing, right? And part of knowing this. So the second one you say, sorry.
I was going to also say is the gang crime. And once again, just before you add in, inshallah, Sheikh, is we saw that when it came to the Safar curriculum books, we do know it's international, it's globally attested to, but specifically for UK, we saw extra relevance. So we saw the gang crime that was mentioned inside the books, especially for the young youth to avoid. We saw that as another like massive USP, especially us being from Lewisham.
So one of the reasons why that is because, you know, when we put the contents together, first we had to go through all the Dars and Nizam books. So for the viewers, it's like when you go to boarding school and you do the full Alimiyya course, there's a whole set of books that you have to go. So we went through the contents of all of that, right? Then we went through books from other institutes across the world, right? And started to put the contents out. Then I went through books that are in the Arabian world, but they're not necessarily in an institute, right? So, you know, you got loads of these books that, so many books that you have. So you take the contents of whatever missing from it, you take it down. Then you start looking at the books of old, books of new, books of, okay, now you've only just covered the Islamic books. Then what we did is we started to look into the existing syllabi, whatever contents, okay, you got those in. Then you start looking into, okay, let's look into youth books. So now we're going outside of the Islamic books. Now we're looking at youth issues, right? So we start looking at youth issues, whether it's to do with, you know, stress, grief, this, anxiety, blah, 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 cutting themselves, whatever it was, right? In the modern world, you've got the selfie thing, the social media, all of that, right?
That's another one you have.
So we started to look at all that, and we're regularly, but we've got an editorial team that's regularly looking out for these things that are coming in. So one of the recent ones that, I mean, if you look in book 7, you've got a massive one on Islamophobia. The reason why Islamophobia itself is like 25 years old. Like the whole concept of it is 25. But we start looking into it, I say, you know what, that's got to go in. And then like that, each of the things that are coming up. So as they come up, we say, oh, look, we want that in the books as well. We want that. So there are certain modern ones that are coming up that one of the ones, the book 9, we still got to address the whole, all the alphabet people.
Of course.
The alphabet people. Be nice, right? So basically, we want to, you know, from a religious point of view, from their point of view, you know, all that, right? We want to address that. So we've left Lut alayhi salam's story for book 9, right? And then we're going to bring that in. But like this, there's all these issues that come up, and you want to highlight them. Now, when we talk specifically about grand crimes, we have to look at, you know, teenager books that were written from a psychological perspective, from a social perspective, from a, you know, whatever. So now you're going to libraries, right? You're looking at, okay, what are the common things that are being addressed for the general youth out there, for the general, and then you bring those, you say, well, where's that in our Islamic thing? How do we make a lesson out of this? So that's where it comes from.
And Sheikh, if I can just ask, what is the size of your team? Because it sounds like a real, you know, massive operation.
Barakallahu feekum. In terms of actual teachers, we have, so we've got 5 branches, 3 in London, 2 just outside London. And between just those 5 branches, we've probably got, I mean, these are staff that are contemporarily teaching and going, right? So between those branches, we've got about 90 to about 100 teachers, right? And staff teachers, whatever. But then on the publication side, we've got about a dozen people.
Okay.
But the dozen people are, you could say, more or less, they get paid full time. But then we've got external people that we rely on for some of the work. Because when it comes to research work, when it comes to other work, we have to externally ask people to do the research and so on. So some editors, some others are you know, even illustrators, typesetters, whatever. They come in now and again when we need them. But the core people, there's about a dozen people that are working.
So it's very impressive, the fact that all of this is being done by 12 people.
Well, you can say that, but the thing is, the way I would put it is, if you look in the history of it, there's been other people that have come, written stuff, they've left. There's others that come, they help with something, and they've probably left. And there are certain times when we needed certain people for certain things, which we, you know, we needed at the time, we used it at the time, but then, you know, those people had to leave for whatever reason it was. But there's a lot of other people that have, you know, their effort has gone behind this, contributed towards. So I'm not just going to say it's just 12 people all along. There's been a lot of, you know, even some of the authors of the primary series, I think only a couple of them are still with us. Otherwise, quite a lot of them have left and they're in other places teaching or whatnot.
And Sheikh, what is it that kind of, you know, gave you that drive? You mentioned the relationship with your teacher, the conversations, but for a a student of knowledge, a sheikh, an ālim, there are so many fields, so many possibilities, and sometimes it's quite easy to kind of become the victim of the demand, whatever's being demanded of the sheikh or the teacher. So what is it that kind of led you to really kind of focus on this and put your time and energy into this?
It's strange that you asked that question. And I think if you look at a lot of people who've done things in life, they do it because something happened to them in their life.
Okay.
Right. So what happened to me in my life? Before I went to the boarding schools, I was given Islam in a certain way. And I thought that was perfect Islam, as in that's what Islam is. But it wasn't at all a full understanding of Islam. There were huge gaps in what I was told. I mean, my Islam, when I was young, came from a few teachers that were there teaching Islamic subjects in the schools. But again, they were limited with the resources they had, right? But it was mainly even my mother that was telling me a lot of stuff. And even she wasn't a scholar. She's giving what her parents had told her. And my father gave a few stuff, but mainly it was my mother giving me a lot of stuff. This was when I was really young, right?
Yeah.
But then she's, if you look at her background, she's coming from a village in Sylhet, right? And alhamdulillah, mashallah, my mother knew quite a lot of stuff that she gave, but none of it was really, scrutinized by any scholars of what she's giving. And then all the lectures and things that I would hear. So you go to a khutbah, right? You go to a masjid. In my time when you were young, you went to a khutbah and you couldn't even understand the language. That was the one problem. But even when you did understand the language, they gave you things that really didn't always relate to the youth. It didn't relate to children. The only thing that related to the children is listen to your parents, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about, parents, their elders, listen to your elders, listen to parents. That's all you heard, right? But what about me? What about us? What about our world? There's nothing. Did the Prophet and did Allah say nothing about our world? So you got these huge questions as you go on. And then one of the other things that I found was in my sort of culture, and I know that a lot of cultures, because what we find in Britain is we've got a lot of people who've come from different backgrounds and then mixed in Britishness with the culture. So you've got British Egyptians, you've got British Bengalis, you've got British Pakistanis, you've got British whatever, right? So, British Somalians now, right? Yeah. So what happens there is when you go to Somalia, when you go to Bangladesh, when you go to Afghanistan, you've got a pure one type of culture, right? But when you come to this country and then you live here for a little while, then you kind of mix in what you've got as a culture here with what you've got in the back. So you don't let go of what you've got in the background, but you don't let go of everything here. Yeah. So what then happens is you become a breed of its own, right? So one of the things I saw, right, and this was, I'm going to say this in this podcast, is that I saw my elders, if you like, of my culture. Right? They were saying that, the women out there, they're not dressing, and keep your eyes down, keep your gaze down, they're not dressing, and okay, that's fine. That's an instruction from the Quran. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Okay, good. But then I'm looking at some of the Bengali women, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, you're wearing these saris. And those saris are exposing part of your stomach. They're exposing part of your arm. So I'm there questioning, I'm thinking, wait, hang on a minute. What's the aura? What's the part that you're supposed to cover? So it's, the woman's supposed to cover full, not supposed to show her legs or not supposed to show her arms. Fine. So why are some of our women doing this? Why are they wearing this? Oh, that's okay. Oh, that. Wait, hang on a minute. You're like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, culture.
What's Islam? What it is, if Islam said something, then why are you guys making an exemption for yourself? So there's a huge question like this. A lot of these things are bugging my mind, right? As I'm growing up. And like I said to you, when I'm going to even when I'm going to school, you see a whole different culture there, right? And you come to mosque, you see a whole masjid, or you come to a whole different culture there. You come home, and you're getting sort of confused. Okay, so you can live a life like that over there, then you can't do it here. But what about all these instructions about Allah and the Day of Judgment, Allah? And then you're getting all these mixed messages, right? So when I went to boarding school and I went to the madrasa, all these questions then get answered. Oh my God, we've got rights as children. Oh my God, women have got, oh my God, this, oh my God. And then you're discovering, you're saying, yeah, this is what Islam said. And you think, well, hang on a minute, where were the books that are supposed to tell you that this is what Islam is?
Yeah.
Right? And you get fractions here and there, little bits here and there, but you don't find it in one place, like something can explain to you. Then I'm thinking to myself, I was one kid. What about all the other kids of my generation? Nobody really got, a syllabus, something that clearly explains like this is it. Go from here A to Z. This is how it is. This is what it is, and this is the truth of with like you said, mix everything. So your society outside there is no different from the classroom you've got here. You've got to apply your Islam outside there as well. So where's that? Then all these things led me to say, you know what, I've got to get this work done. And with my Shaykh as well telling me get this. But I felt this need. Why? Because I'm like, it's really me. I'm looking at myself thinking, how could I have made my life different? Like if I could go 30, 40 years back on it, right? I said, I'm doing it for me and I'm doing it for all the my generation kids and I'm doing it for the next generation kids. And that's where the real thing came with let's stick to that. Let's just get this one syllabus that gives them this holistic approach to Islam.
Alhamdulillah. So you had the inspiration. Now moving on to any, let's say, project which is massive, like the Safar publication, you must have had, I'm assuming you've had some challenges. Could you explain about any of them, inshallah?
Challenges, what kind of challenges?
So I'll give you a presumption that I kind of maybe thought, okay, Shaykh Hasan Ali, the team at Safar Publications, making this work across a number of communities, as you mentioned, different cultures. Sometimes it's not going to be a one size fits all, but mashallah, it's done very, very inclusively. So I want to ask a question, might be a bit controversial, but in terms of theology and fiqh,
okay,
how Sheikh didn't I tell you about
it's good. I like that. It's good. It's good.
Tell you about
It's good that he brought that up. It's good that he brought it up.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is once again, Lewisham. I was putting back to Lewisham.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lewisham, very, very.
Don't bring us into your
What I say is that with Lewisham, we are quite diverse. And mashallah, when I looked into the books, I was quite impressed. I thought maybe, subhanAllah, there could be a byproduct here of fostering unity, but I don't know if that's my presumption. But when I looked into, especially book 8, when you spoke about Tariq, when you talk about the Islamic history, the Ottomans, the Mamluk, when you talked about also when it came to the heads of theology in our schools, mashallah, I saw it was very, very balanced. And I thought it was very, very good. But this is my presumption, inshallah. Was there a byproduct or objective to say we are in the UK, we are all together, inshallah ta'ala, different cultures. We could be Bengali, we could be from African culture, Egyptian, like Sheikh.
different opinions.
Different opinions also. But I thought maybe, this is my presumption.
It's a good thing you brought this up. I don't think anyone's asked me that question, but it's good that you asked because I can answer. Yeah, go on.
But I thought there was going to be maybe some in the community that may have a challenge with this. Obviously, alhamdulillah, with Lewisham, we utilize his book, we appreciate the books, just to let you know, inshallah.
It's good. It's good. So basically, again, it's my journey. And being with the Shaykh as well, my Shaykh, Fadl Rahim, I'm going to refer back to him because what happened is I went to a particular madrasa, right? So every madrasa is going to give you a certain pathway, certain thing. You got to go on this road here. If you want to get to success, you go to Jannah, you better join those people. We go to Jannah, right? So you start off with that, right? And then when you're on that path, you kind of, first you're all heated. That's it. I'm going to propagate my one. I'm going to tell everyone. So what I did, right, is that I'm coming out there, right? And I'm coming back to my own town. I'm coming to the places that I'm traveling, and I'm challenging the Muslims. With all these different sectarian backgrounds, sectarian thoughts, or even manhaj or different way of looking at certain things, or the madhab or whatever, or non-madhab, and there's people who don't stick to madhab. Yeah. So basically, I'm having my challenges with all of these one by one. I'm coming to, and I'm really going out there to say, hey guys, this you should follow this, you should follow this, right? So, but they're giving me their side of things, and sometimes I get stuck. And I'm like, hang on a minute, the guy's got a point. He brought this ayah out. And how come I've never looked at ayah like that? I haven't looked at the hadith like that. So then every time I'm coming back to Shaykh Fadl Rahim, and Shaykh Fadl Rahim is telling me that, look, well, in that regard, they're right. In this regard, you're right. But in that regard, they're right. And then I come with, after another group, I've talked to them and I come back to him and said, well, they've got these points that are right, but here's the overall perspective you need to see, right? So what he's doing is that he's not confining me to one group or one thing. Yeah. He's telling me that, look, they're right in this, they're right in that. You've got to have this sort of wide thing, wide outlook on everyone, right? And of course, unity doesn't mean conformity. It doesn't mean that now you become like everybody else.
Yes.
You've got to have your base, right? So he's told me clearly that this is our base, but this is how we should look at them. Now, for example, certain people restrict you in terms of fi sabilillah, in the path of Allah. What is the path of Allah? Some will say, well, this is it. If you go out in the path of Allah, and you're struggling in this way, then that's path of Allah, but not this one.
Yeah.
And another group will say, it's this one, not that one. And then Shaykh al-Islam will say, no, it's all of them. Like, they're all serving a greater purpose. Look at the deen from a wider perspective. And there's things that he taught me, which I don't think many other teachers or others would have taught me. Like, for example, he said to me, never judge a person by the beard. It's a very clear instruction. He said, we want to keep beards, we want to keep it long. That's fine. It's a sunnah. Okay, fine. It's a sunnah. You want to keep it fine. We said, never judge them by that. Because you don't know what's inside the person, right? Right? No. Again, the hadith of the arful luha, right? Arful luha, like lengthen the beard. So he'll cover all that, but he said, don't judge them by that, right? Because a person is a person from many different factors, right? So then the same thing was that with all these denominations and groups, he said, you take the best from each one, right? So that was one big thing, right? Second thing is my own journey, like I said to you, that I'm now going through, even when I became an imam and so on, I'm dealing with a lot of different backgrounds. And what I'm having to do is you're having to cater for people, but still have lines that you're drawing.
Yep.
Right? So certain lines you have to draw and say, look, I'm sorry, I can't include you in this.
Yes. Yeah.
But with many others, you have to say, well, I need to get on. Like, I tell you one interesting thing that Shaykh al-Islam said also, the Aqidah thing about 73 sects, right? So his thing is that 73 sects are large umbrellas. Because if you count even just the divisions within the Shia sect, you're going to come to like more than 36 or 40, right? So by the time you count all the other sects and every other one you've had, right, just in the past, if you go to some from the Mu'tazilites and all that, right, you start looking at different sects, right, you'll run out of 73. So how do you understand this? So you're going to say these are large umbrellas, right? And the one that is Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah has many different groups under it. Many groups, right? So this is the understanding that he gave, and the understanding I have of, although there are barriers and borders that you have to clearly outline, you get me? So certain things are no. So if anybody accepts another prophet after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I'm sorry, you're not in the faith anymore. Anyone accepts that, you're going to, I don't know, add any part of the Quran or even take one letter away from the Quran, I'm sorry, you can't be part of this. So there are certain borders that you're going to have. But then other differences you have, you're going to have to look at it and say, you know what, he's still a part of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So when we wrote the books, the thing was, look, if you look at the Aqidah points that we make, right? Now, when you go to the Aqidah books, they sometimes can get very in your face. Like, they can be like, you either stand here, you stand there. You hear that? But then when you go to the roots of it, you find that it all comes from the Quran and Ahadith. But if you just quote the Quran, they're both agreeing to the Quranic ayah.
Okay.
They're both agreeing to this hadith. But they agree, but they have different points on that ayah, different points from that. So why not just give them the ayah, give them the hadith, and then what is it now? The question is going to come up, what about explaining the differences where somebody could go wrong? So what we deliberately did, and purposefully so, and rightly so, is that you don't want to keep these debates in the beginning of the book or in the middle of the syllabus. You want to keep them at the end. So they've got all the crux of everything they wanted. Okay, fine, now he understands what Islam is. Then you tell them, like, guys, look, this is what a madhab is like. So the madhab, the whole thing comes in book 8.
Yeah.
So, most of the book, okay, they're going on a journey of, okay, this is what you do. Just do what it is, fine. You get to the 8th book, and then you're giving this understanding, there are differences of opinion. But what we've always done, though, is in our teacher's guides, right? We've always said, if you have a Shafi'i student or a Hanbali student or a whatever student, what we tell them in teacher training is tell the child to pray like the mother and father. While they're doing, so our one predominantly is Hanafi, right? But then we tell them to go home. So if your parents are doing Raf'il Yadayn, do Raf'il Yadayn. But in the class, because we have to teach everyone in one, we're just going to say, just do no Raf'il Yadayn. But we're not against it, but we want you to pray like your parents, which keeps the harmony, but also sticks to the truth, and it also keeps away from the divisions and so on that you've got, right? But these concepts, you can't understand them until you're at a certain level, right? So that's why we've got them in the secondary sort of, but then they can digest it, they can understand it, so we put it over there.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, go on.
Sheikh, you mentioned in the teacher's guide, so we're talking about the curriculum, but just so that we don't kind of lose the door, what would you suggest are kind of standards or the kind of underlying level of competency that you would expect from an institution of learning or a masjid that we should try to aim for example, as masajid in the UK?
So one of the things that you've got to do is it's all about the selective process of you selecting those teachers, right? There's a huge part there, which a lot of people might overlook, right? And for example, I've had this, I've not always wanted to get the best and the most brilliant teacher, but I've always gone for the teacher that is a team player.
Okay.
Because you have to be a team and you have to play for the team. You can't be an individual. Like, you get these, why don't they like those strikers that are just waiting on the other side, waiting for the ball to be kicked over so they can just score it in? Why not? Because he's not a team player. So they expect the strikers to come into midfield to go into defense when needed, and then for all them to charge out again, back to their positions and back to the offensive. Now, that's what you need in teaching. So we're not only looking for qualities, like, there are certain qualities that are given. If somebody can't even read the Quran, or if somebody is reading the Quran poor, you can't really put them as teachers, because your students are only going to get as good as this teacher, right? But then you've got to look at the knowledge of Islam and the knowledge of what they have. But then the big thing I do have is about, like, if I had all my teachers on a certain manhaj, or a certain wavelength, certain way of thinking, I cannot bring now somebody who's in the Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but he's got a different angle.
Yes.
Because he's not going to blend with my teachers, right? And there's going to be disruptive, heated arguments and things going to come up. So I can't bring those. And I'm happy for those people to collectively get together
And teach.
and teach in another place, right? But you do have these things, right, that come up, right? Do you do this, or do you not? Which side of the waters do you stand on? Right? Certain debates are very hot.
Yeah.
So the thing is, we have respect for, my thing is that you've got to have respect for one another. But then at the same time, when you delivering the thing, you have to have your team that is on the same length, same wavelength, right? Okay, so that's one thing. Second thing, when you say about competency, is that, I think, again, a lot of people overlook this, right? Is before you even can go into the classroom and the teaching, you've got the place where you're teaching. And a lot of these happen to be masajid.
Yes.
And you've got the people who run the masajid might have it depends how much of a hand they have on your institution, whether they control you, whether they're influencing you, whether they're saying, no, you got to have class size this big, you got to do this, you got to do that. Oh, here's my nephew who just happened to come over from back home. I want to give him a job and you've got to take him. Things like this. I mean, come on. You've got to be independent of all of that. So let's say that we've gone clear of all of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
The kind of teacher that you want is someone who's going to know all the different, at least have some idea of all the different areas that you're teaching. And so you've got the fiqh, you've got the aqidah, you've got the tajweed section, you've got the seerah sections, you've got, so they've got general sort of things. And then I think there's always teacher training that you can give to teachers to up their skills and their knowledge and so on. But you've got to say, okay, this person can teach all of this, and they have some basic knowledge outside that, but not just knowledge though. You've got to have a level of amal, a level of practice. So you can't have a guy that's come in, or a girl that's just come in. As soon as they're outside, they're taking the hijab off.
Yeah.
They're smoking something.
Yeah.
They're like, hello. So you've got to look at the general sort of life. And we do have certain things that we say, like, if you're going to join us, we don't want to see you posting X, Y, and Z on social media or something like that, right? You gotta be honest, because then your institution can come also under the fire, right? So there's quite a lot of things, but we can go deeper and deeper. But then I would say, with this regard, we do have teacher training that is free. If anyone just puts a Safar teacher training on the internet, you'll find a number of hours of free thing that for
teacher
teachers.
training. Yeah. I was just gonna emphasize on that point, because to segue onto madrasa management now, because you also have a head teacher or management teacher training also. So just a little story. When I first became head teacher of here at the Lewisham Islamic Institute, new, very, very green, I was looking at a lot of material to see where I could get some guidance from, which was external. And I did come across the Safar publications, and I saw there's a number of videos, which is also free, that you could complete. And it didn't just go in terms of the curricula, but it also had a number of points in terms of logistics, operational, as you mentioned, teacher training. What was the inspiration to give that to other head teachers of other makatib or madaris? that you thought, yes, we need to have this and they need to be able to learn? Because unfortunately, of course, there is a number of madaris that maybe they do go bust. It could be due to maybe management. It could be due to financial issues. It could be due to many things. But what was your...
so just to answer that, right, to give a simple idea, if you're opening a business, right, let's just give a simple example. If someone's going to open a restaurant, is it just you, the waiter and the chef, the three of you that are going to get this thing done? Or are you going to have to look at the background of, okay, you got your business rates, you got your, maybe the landlord, you got repair works you're going to have to do, you got taxes that you're going to have to calculate, right? You've got to now have a system where when you take in the cash, the till, from the till, how do you calculate all that? So you're going to have an accountant, right? It's clear. You're going to have an accountant. You're going to have, now you're adding on fees that you don't see on a daily basis, right? But if you don't have the accountant and you don't have, the person who's going to do your building repair works, and you don't look at their contract, and you don't look at the landlord, and you don't look, how are you going to run this place? You, your chef and your waiters can't run this place, right? Okay. The chef and all that is what chef, cooks the food. The waiters we see every day, right? And the manager boss might be here, might not be here, but we know there's an entire system that makes this thing run. Now, the big problem with most of these madaris, most of the makatib madaris, is that they ignore all of that. They're just thinking, teacher, student, book. The three of us, we're going to crack it, smash it. Hello, you've got fees to collect. You got calculations to how you're going to collect all those fees. The larger you go, the more admin work there's going to be. What about the admin? Do you now look at the admin as a, Mr. Somebody that comes and does it and then goes? No, hello. What about attendance? And then you start looking, one of the things that we looked at is the school models. So if you go look at the school models and you see, okay, there's got all this stuff going on. In the admin, they've got this going on. You've got health and whatever. You got this, that, the safety and so on.
Yep.
Then you say, well, why is it that our madrasa is not going to have that? Well, we need the same thing. So anyway, a very big point I want to touch on is when most people, they ask me, what do you start from? When you want to do all of this, like you said, well, there's part of your admin, there's part of it this, right? There's part of the syllabus, and it's all in your teacher training. What do you start from? Well, I would say you start from the finance.
Okay.
Why? Because if you can say, okay, what do we need first? So let's just say, okay, we need this many teachers. We need this syllabus. Okay, we need to pay rent here. We need this equipment, whatever, to run out. So, okay, the benches, the whatever, the mats, the whatever you might say. Okay, fine. Then you say, okay, we need to have somebody overseeing this. So that's your head teacher or whatever. We might need a cover teacher. Okay, that's that. We need an admin person. And an admin person is very, very, not one person. Sometimes you need two, sometimes you need three, right? Depending on the size that you're growing. So you calculate, okay, all of these people, all of their salaries, all of these, then you say, okay, here's the total. And from the total, add a bit extra as well for, whatever might not have been collected by fees or whatever. That total then needs to be divided by the students that are going to come here. If you can start from there first, then you've calculated all the things that you need. The fees then pays for your entire system, right? You shouldn't come in, start, and then say, oh, hang on a minute, how come we ain't got money for this? How come we haven't got money for that? And how come, there's a short of budget? And the masjid saying, where's our money? You guys are not bringing enough. Let's increase the students.
Yeah.
And then you're messing up your whole process because now you've got too many students in the class. Right. So you're doing all sorts of acrobat, movement just to make you work. But you should have just started from the finance.
Yeah,
If you can get the finance right, then what you do is you then need to, obviously, you got one hurdle, which is probably the committee members in the masjid. Another hurdle is the parents who are actually going to pay. So all you do is you sit with the parents, you sit with the community, and you explain, look, we're going to put the fees at this price. It's going to pay for all of this. And once you get them to agree, there's loads of things you can say. You can talk about the Sky packages and the Netflix and the all the other outings or whatever, right? But this is just another small thing in the thing. When you're over that, then everything else you can put together. But the admin thing that you said, that section of it, I've seen places, if they don't give emphasis to that, the whole thing just flops, because what will happen is the teacher gets called out from the lesson.
Yeah.
Because of a student issue. Students not behaving in the lesson. Teacher has to leave the whole lesson now to go and find the number, phone the parent. What about your other 14 children that are sitting waiting for them to be taught? So you get the picture.
Sheikh, you mentioned sitting down with the parents and explaining the process. So how important and perhaps what kind of challenges or solutions do we have to the role of the parents in the education that the child receives? because we focus a lot on the institution, the curriculum, the teacher. And from my experience, sometimes you may have a Muslim parent who they don't pray, or they're kind of a bit far away from the deen, and they expect the masjid is now going to turn their child into a righteous person.
Sounds like babysitting to us.
Aladdin's cave, there's there, and it's going to be all transformed. So you're going to get some parents, like you just said, they're not practicing, but they said they're children.
Yeah.
You'll get other parents who are semi-practicing. And then you get other parents who are on your case. Why haven't you given more homework? Why is it my child is not learning so much more that I could have, had him teach? So you got all sorts of parents. And the Quran has more or less said it, these categories exist. فَمِنْهُمْ ظَالِمٌ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمِنْهُمْ مُقْتَصِدٌ وَمِنْهُمْ سَابِقٌ بِالْخَيْرَاتِ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Whenever revelation came, Allah said there's those who are the oppressors, like they left the Quran, they abandoned it, they never read it, or they never engaged with it how they should do. Then you got muqtasid, those in between. They engage, don't engage, engage, don't engage. Then you got the sabiqun bil khayr, those who are racing ahead to try and get the best of all the, best of the Quran in their lives and so on. So with the parents as well, you can always find, in every category of people, you're going to find this kind of division. So the thing is, we have to look at those students as amana, as a kind of a trust that Allah has given us, right? So it's not just about the parents, because we've got to think to ourselves, in 15 years' time, in 10 years' time, this kid is no longer going to be living with the parents, or no longer going to be really having a good, having a life with the parents, or they're dependent even on the parents. So now it's about the child. Whether the parents practice or not practice, I've got to get the best I can for that child to become a good Muslim. But with the parents, we have, and we say this in the training as well, have inductions, bring the parents in, try and get them to be engaged as best as you can. Of course, we should have all the contact numbers, everything. We should be contacting them when the students are not either, they're not attending, or they're not punctual, or they're not studying. We should be first in contact with them. Have parents' evenings and parents' mornings. Have parents' coffee mornings, right? Where they just drop in, you can do this once a term. Parents come in, coffee morning, whatever, just chit chat, whatever. Again, you're not going to have all the parents are going to come in, but at least you've made a start to engage with some of them, right? Then you can have one of the things we've done is we've had certain seminars we've done. So when they drop off the kids, this might happen once, twice a term or something. You have a certain subject that is important for the parents, like parenting, your young children. And we're even divided to primary, to secondary, and have those parents come in and listen to that for an hour, right? It's a coffee morning stroke lecture. So they come in, they listen to all of you, and then we'll have a conversation, an open conversation about challenges that parents are facing. But what you're doing, you're trying to engage them.
Yeah.
But you're still gonna get some parents that are just there, just gonna drop them off, pay the fees, boom, I'm gone, and they're not practicing, or they're not really interested. All for them is just a tick box.
Yes.
I've got to send them there because my whole community is gonna say, why have you sent your child to the masjid? And again, the perception is for them to finish the Quran reading. Hello, there's a whole Islam that they're supposed to learn and become part of. But anyway, what we've found though is if you work on those kids, regardless of the parents, those kids, subhanAllah, will become something that the parents could probably envy tomorrow, and they will look up to. We've had a number of families. I can go on, right? A number of families I've seen in front of my own eyes that I taught, the parents weren't so practicing, but the kids, mashallah, they're in the salah, they're in the, and even then some parents start to practice as well, right? I say this, and I'll say it again. I remember a young girl, 9 years old, she came to us. Her parents did not practice at all, no salah, no nothing, right? But they just dropped her off. Why they dropped her off? Because I used to go to this circle where some of these parents used to come, and they used to come once a month there. Just like a flavoring of Islam, and then they're into all their, their Western studies, whatever you into, right? So now this girl, I knew that, she just come from family, no hijab, no salah, no nothing. So we're giving her durus and so on. And every now and again I stop and I ask her, what's going on in your lives? What's going on? And so on. And then I'm telling them, look, encourage your family members to pray as well. The Quran says, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ, right? Or tell your family to pray. So anyway, I'm asking her, and then I realized that this girl, obviously the parents are not praying and so on. I said, look, just do your own salah, right? Fine. The next time I asked, it was such a surprise thing. This 9-year-old said to me, oh yeah, Ustad, my parent, my mother she's praying. And I said, what happened? Like, she said, what happened is she woke up for Fajr. The daughter woke up for Fajr. Now the parents are not waking up for Fajr at all. So the daughter went up to the mum and woke up the mum for Fajr.
Right? 9 years old.
9 years old. But what she said to the mum next was the amazing part. The mum said, "Why are you waking me up for?" So she didn't just say, the typical, I don't want you to go to Jannah. No, you know what she said? She said, "Mum, I want you to go to Jannah with me as well." SubhanAllah. I want you to go to Jannah with me as well. And I can imagine, like, a mum listening to a daughter saying that. I'm going to, like, I'm praying because I'm on my way to Jannah, but I want you to join me, right? That made the mother just get her up straight away, do her wudu, prayed, whatever, and then started with the mum. Then slowly, so years later, the dad was getting into it and he's practicing. Now the family is fully practicing, right? The thing is, it started from that one girl, right? I've seen other families where, mashallah, alhamdulillah, the family were very far off, but the kids themselves, the cousins that came, they got into the deen. They've supported one another. They're still on the deen very strong. Their parents are semi onto it, but alhamdulillah, from nothing to semi, but they're fully onto it, right? So that can be the case.
Alhamdulillah, Sheikh, we had two similar incidences. One, a young, so I was actually conducting the presentation. So we have school visits. And so we had a school visit. I think they're maybe year 4, year 5. So they bring them non-Muslims, sit down. We take them through the 5 pillars of Islam, but more relevant to kind of, their age, their lives. And there was a young boy at the front, clearly, like white English. And he was, engaging, and he knew quite a lot. And, I asked, what's this called? He said, the thobe. So, I was thinking, where did he get that from? And answering like quite a few questions. And then he came up to me and told me, I'm a Muslim. So I said, like, really? Actually, I'm mistaken. He said, my father is a Muslim. My father is a Muslim. I said, oh, does he come to this masjid? So a river. And he said, yeah, he's come here before. And so I think around 6 months to a year later, he took his shahada, that young boy. And he's quite active now. So, he's quite well known in the community. We had another individual. He tells his own story, but similar. His son started to play football with the Lewisham Islamic Center youth team and took Islam home to his father. And, his father came to the masjid, they both became Muslim. So sometimes we underestimate the impact of these young children if they have the confidence and the platform, if they're platformed and given that space, like the Sahaba, subhanAllah, many of them very young.
Yeah, the one thing that we underestimate is when you say kids, you're actually looking at adults to be in one decade. 1 decade, just 10 years. These are adults to be, and you really don't see that. I've seen now my students' children now coming to the
subhanAllah.
So I said, but what I see is, subhanAllah, like, one thing I really notice is, when I first started with the Safar Academy and students coming, certain families, they had, like, let's say, for example, there's 4 brothers. 2 younger brothers came to us, but the 2 older brothers never came to us because the Safar Academy never existed at the time. We saw a massive divide. Like you can almost see like a clear contrast between the 2. These 2 are on the deen, they know what it is, and them 2, unfortunately, like, they're on a different, okay, they're attached to the deen, but they're not, you can see the difference in that. And family after family, you can see that when they grow up, you see, wow, your words, your whatever, your actions, whatever it was, shaped this person's life. But it doesn't stop there, though, because these now 30-year-olds that were, 20 years ago, they're 10-year-olds, right? So now they're 30, 33, whatever. In another 20 years' time, they're going to be grandparents. Just 20 years' time, they're going to be grandparents. And now you can see the tree forming, right? So what you've done is, with that one child that you affected, by the time they become a grandfather, great-grandfather, you've now affected a whole family tree. And it carries on. And I say to a lot of teachers, and one of the biggest motivations is that the alif, ba, ta, tha, or anything that you teach them, imagine for the rest of their lives they're going to use that, the whole reward of that, and they will be inspired for their children to use it and whatnot. All that comes into your hasanat, into your deeds. every time this child would pray, every time this child would know Allah, every time they do anything, ibadah, it's equally given to you in measurement.
Sheikh, I think potentially the younger generation of teachers and students of knowledge, they overlook this position because the age of instant gratification, if you don't have 1,000 views for a video, you're not doing anything. And so it's very easy to kind of forget, as you said, you're talking about 40 years, of dedication and seeing the fruit, but that fruit is long lasting. Whereas for many of the younger generation, it's, no, I want results now.
I'm going to say something on this, which is really important. I've had a lot of people ask me, right? It's like, okay, I go out there, I give lectures, and I might be on social media, whatever, right? And then people talk about it, and I say, listen, man, I said, what's going to last? Something that you leave behind, right? So if you were to, leave an individual behind that you actually affected, and when you say affected, it's not like, all this social media stuff and so on, you can only affect a person for a few seconds.
Yes.
And the way they've been affected for a few seconds, it'll probably be gone from them after a few seconds. The real change comes with suhbah, with companionship. Any real change in this ummah for 1400 something years is suhbah. So if you look at the Sahaba, where did the Sahaba get the name Sahaba from? It's from suhbah, with companionship, right? If it wasn't for the companionship, they wouldn't be who the Sahaba were. Now, what's interesting is this. The Sahabi or the Sahaba might have quoted from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam some 20 ahadith, some 200, some, if you go really high, okay, in the thousands, but not that many. 1,000, 2,000, 1,500, whatever, some of the big names, right? Fine. These are ahadith. But what was their real effect? The real effect wasn't these ahadith only. It was the 90% of silent times, or the 80% of silent times they spent with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in observation and in suhbah and companionship. So for example, if you look at the 24 hours of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you find very little speech in there. So after Fajr, he'll speak a little bit. Then he goes in his own quarters, right? He comes, in the early morning, he used to come to the halaqas. Sometimes he speaks, sometimes he doesn't. Then after Dhuhr, he might give something, he might not, right? After Asr, he's with his family. And then this is where he walks with his companions out. After Maghrib, he might do something, might not. There again, there's some speech here that after Isha, nothing. He's going straight to sleep, right? Then he's got his nightly prayer, then his Fajr again. If you look at the 24 hours, you get very little speech. What do you get mostly? Mostly you get observation. So what they did is they saw the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they saw him, how he prayed, they saw how he sat inside, they saw his akhlaq, they saw his character, they saw how he dealt with people, and they started to emulate. So the thing is, you're seeing a lot now, and you're trying to emulate. You're hearing, yes, but you're also seeing and you're trying to do it. Now, the thing is, every single time you've seen in your own area, any area, I challenge this to anyone. When you see somebody becoming practice, what's it becoming? Where do you come from? You come from suhbah. So somebody goes, all of a sudden they go to an Islamic retreat. They spend a good few days there, a few weeks, and they come back, all changed. People go to Umrah, people go to Hajj, people go to these Islamic holidays and whatever, right? Or these camps or whatever. Islamic conferences over a number of few days, right? Islamic lectures where they went halaqas, they spent weekly halaqas. So the real impact is, those weekly halaqas where you get only 20 people. I'll give you the story of that. People might say to me, you get so many views on certain lectures. Forget that, man. Let me tell you the real deal. So I did once, just now, I just stopped, like at COVID time I stopped, right? For 10 years, I did a dars in my local masjid, 10 years. Every Thursday evening we did dars. When we first started, we had about 100 and something people. Give it a few weeks, give it a few months, we've gone literally down to the 30, 40 people, then sometimes it's 20 people, sometimes 15. On a bad day, it's 5 people. But I'm not giving up. I'm still doing this every week, right? But on a normal day, there's about 20 to 40 people that would come. I will tell you that the real impact you see is with those 20, 40 people that come there on a regular basis, they really change their lives. You touch a part of them which you wouldn't touch through these other lectures. Yeah. Because it's real companionship. It's real, face to face and so on. Whenever you see any real impact, it happens because of the companionship. So now let's get back to the social media, stuff and the likes. If you haven't got this many likes, You know what's going to happen? You want to really see this. I'll give you an example. Like, for example, you've definitely listened to Sheikh Kishk,
Yeah.
right? You've heard his lectures, right? And you hear when he's, on the Egyptian members when he's roaring, right? And the way he says it, man, he gives you goosebumps,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, now, you go and ask the average person at the Sheikh Kishk. Oh, no one knows him. There's only, illa mashallah, few people that know him. Okay, the older generation, they used to listen to him, they know him. The younger generation, absolutely, they don't know him. The middle generation, most of them don't know him, right? Now, but he was a giant in his time, right? He's got so many lectures out there, but who listens to him? When a person dies, all these lectures and other things that he said through voice or whatever, after a very short period of time, they're all going to die with him. And people are onto the next alive speaker, the guy who's the next celebrity, the next thing. So this means nothing. Now, let me ask you another thing, right? Who would have ever known Ibn Hajar Asqalani if he wasn't for Fath al-Bari? Who would ever know Imam Nawawi if he wasn't for Riyadh al-Salihin?
Yeah.
Who would ever know Imam Bukhari if he wasn't for his, So we're now looking at 1,000 years for some of these giants, right? 600 years, 700, 1,000 years, right? Over 1,000 years. What did they leave? They left a book, or they left something that you could actually benefit from after their deaths. So what most of our guys don't understand there is your whole social media, your whole life, it comes and goes. Within just a year or months, everyone's forgotten about you. You're gone. Unless you leave something or someone behind that you really influence in a big way. You don't have to leave a book. You can even influence a person. So when you look at, for example, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, right? You look at his teachers. His teachers influenced him. And then he became who he became, right? But some of his teachers might be unknown, right? Some of his teachers only left one book, and some left nothing. But he became the giant of his time because he had that influence. Now, the influence he got from those people are going to be recorded. Whatever he does is going to be recorded in their hasanat, in their book of good deeds. Yeah. So before you leave, you got to, that hadith says, right? أو علم ينتفع به, right? Or أو ولد صالح يدعو له. You're going from the earth, so you're either going to leave some sadaqah jariyah, some continuous charity, or some knowledge that people are going to benefit from, or you're going to leave a good, righteous child that's going to pray for you. That's all you got. And that's what's going to keep, give you something for the long term. Otherwise, you ain't got nothing.
So, Sheikh, what advice would you give to a young person who's looking for, the beginning of his Islamic development, spiritual development? You mentioned the halaqah and the importance of it, how you see that has affected so many in your own life. You've seen it firsthand. What advice would you give to a young person who might be out there looking?
I would say go and visit your local masajid, right? And go to different masajid. Go and spend time with the imams, right? Or at least see whatever time you can get with those imams, right? Because imams are so busy as well, fine. But then what you should look for is, you should look for that imam. He can give you time, right? And of course, there's a little vetting process here, right? So you don't go to anyone out there, right? So it's got to be people that your wider sort of, family members will say, yeah, those imams are okay. So let's keep all the divisions out below, right? Yeah. So from the imams that your parents and your family, these are okay imams, go and visit them, go and spend time with them and sit with them, try and get the time off them. And then see how much benefit you can get from them. You're going to come across one imam somewhere. He might not be the most knowledgeable, but he might be the most effective for you. And he might be exactly the thing that you need from that imam, right? This is what they need, the suhbah, they need the companionship, right? And if you can't find someone like that, let's say an imam, all our masajid have got, every single other masjid has got halaqas and, these kind of lessons. Why is it, man? This really hurts me sometimes. People don't do the right calculation. They'd rather go online, which is fine. You can learn certain things online, which is really good and fine. Yeah. But why is it that you're not benefiting from your local masjid, from your local person who's giving these regular halaqat? And I'll tell you one bigger thing that's missing from this. If you look at the syllabus that we've got, if you go from book 1 all the way to book 8 or book whatever, you've got a systematic learning. Most of these internet pieces that you watch, they're not giving you anything systematic. Sporadic pieces, right? And you can never join them. You don't know what's this from that. You just don't know. Yeah. And the other big danger with Shaykh there's really dangerous now is the youth are not even looking at truth and falsehood. They're just looking at numbers.
Yeah.
So it's like, this guy's got 7 million followers or 2 million followers. He's got to be a big G. He's a big G. I'm just going to follow him, whatever, right? And I remember in my local masjid, I remember one parent came with an 8-year-old and he pushed him along towards me. He said, gosh, say salam to the Shaykh. So as the kid's putting his hand out, he looks at his dad, he goes, how many followers does he have? As he's putting, how many followers does he have? And obviously, Dan's a little bit embarrassed, right? Yeah. And I said to the kid, I actually knelt down. And I said, kid, look me in the eye. I said, let me just tell you one thing. I said,
you said,
with all the
100K followers.
No. I said, it's not about the followers that you have. I said, in all the likes, I said, you only need 1 like. I said, you need 1 like. And I said, that's the like of Allah.
Allah.
SubhanAllah.
If you got that 1 like, your dunya akhirah is done. If you miss that 1 like, you're finished. Because if you that hadith, right, where when Allah إِذَا أَحَبَّ Allahu fulan, when Allah loves so-and-so, he calls Jibreel. He says, oh Jibreel, I love so-and-so. I want you to love so-and-so. So Jibreel goes to the 7th heaven. Oh angels of the 7th heaven, Allah loves so-and-so, you all should love so-and-so. And then they come to 6th, and the 6th comes to 5th, and 5th, all the way to this sama, this sky. And then they tell the angels, so-and-so Allah loves, Allah wants you to love them. So they then come to the earth, and then يُوضَعُ لَهُ الْقَبُولُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. What they spread is acceptance for this person. They make hearts attached to this person. Like acceptance, what does that mean? That doesn't even mean that people are following you. It just means that Allah loves you, so they want as much of the creation or as much of the things around you just to qabul, as in for you to be accepted, your work to be accepted, right? Even though people may know it or not know it, right? Now the opposite happens when Allah hates someone. I hate someone. Oh Jibreel, you should hate him. Comes the 7th heaven. They come the 6th, 5th, for all the way to the dunya, and then they are literally creating, those things that people are going to hate him. Right now, tell me this, right? The biggest numbers we've got on social media are what? Are the singers. The ones that are dressed inappropriately, the ones that are lewd, the ones that are, fahsha, munkar, obscenity, sin, all that they're giving out around, and they're dancing and doing all sorts of, things that Islam has said haram, right? They've got the biggest numbers.
Sheikh, even if you look at the kind of like in the Islamic arena, sometimes, you find videos with the large numbers, but you look at the type of content and it's divisive, name calling, shaming, and, it's not something really that you would kind of attribute to righteousness. It's unrighteousness perhaps packaged with an Islamic color, flavor. But Sheikh, of course, we don't want to keep you in prison for too.
No, it's okay. Let me just add this one thing, right? Let me just ask, like, for example, if you ask me, like Shaykh Fadl Rahim, at that time, the internet didn't ever exist.
Yes.
Social media never existed. If you asked how many followers he had, well, 0. And let me ask you about your teachers. How many of your teachers are on social media?
So, Sheikh, it was a point that I actually wanted to mention. There is a teacher that comes to mind. And just thinking off the top of my head, I know in the UK, about at least 5. And in America, 4. In certain parts of Africa, probably, between 10 and 20 active du'at, imams, students, teachers, and they all studied with him. And, his humility was such that he would write notes in the students' books if they couldn't write the Arabic yet themselves. And, he's impoverished currently. He's unknown, online. He doesn't look for fame. In fact, he would turn away from it. So, the reward that he's receiving, Sheikh, whilst he's alive, and yet no one knows him.
No one knows him. Now, if you go to, like, let's say you go to the Quran, right? You go to certain people in the Quran. You say, well, let's look at the Khidr who's traveling with Musa alayhi salam. His mention is in the Quran, right? A person so close to Allah, عَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. I gave him direct knowledge from myself, but you know what? It's unknown to anyone.
Yeah.
Now let's look at some of the other figures in the Quran that you've got. Nobody really knows some of these figures, but Allah just mentions them in kind of a, let's just say, for example, that man, Surah Yasin, جَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ رَجُلٌ يَسْعَى. قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين. Now he comes, he gives da'wah, he comes from the outskirts of from the city, he gives da'wah and then he dies, then he goes straight to Jannah, right? So he's given da'wah, he's gone to Jannah. His name is not even mentioned. Nobody really knows who this person is, but they know he's a figure. But the thing is,
Success.
Allah's showing the success. And then you look at, for example, how people went to Jannah, right? You find a hadith, a person who cut a branch, and he goes to, he's now in Jannah, moving from side to side, lying down. A woman who used to clean the Prophet's masjid. So insignificant that they didn't even think it was worthy of calling Rasulullah to do a janazah.
SubhanAllah.
So they buried her, and it's in Sahih Muslim, right? So the Prophet says, where's that woman that used to come and clean my masjid? And then, didn't anyone tell you, Messenger of Allah, we buried her? And he, in the hadith, says he was upset by that. He said, why have you not hurt me? Why didn't you tell me that she's passed away? I would have done her janazah. Then what does he do? Another hadith, he gets up. He goes all the way to her grave. All the way to her grave. And then he makes dua there, right? For her forgiveness, for whatever it was. He's made he stands there for a while. And then what we find in the hadith is a woman. She was an African woman as well. And they thought no significance of her, right? Okay, she just comes, cleans the masjid and just goes. Then he said, Wallahi, he said, I have seen this woman standing in Jannah and in her hands are the dust of my masjid.
Allah.
Right? Now, again, insignificant, but she's made it to Jannah. And you know what our, I just want to put it in a nutshell, right? Why this social media is so significant is because it just makes you shine in people's eyes very quickly. And that's the only reason why. If you really look at the deeds of Islam, some of the best deeds of Islam are the ones that you don't shine and nobody knows about. So if you look at the 7 reasons why you come under the arsh, under the throne of Allah on the day of Judgment. Now let's look at the 7 reasons, right? Imam Adil, right? A person who's a just ruler, but he has to be just. Now, all those moments he's had, like trying to, he gets slapped this way, slapped that way because he never judged this way. No one sees that, right? Shabun, the young man who becomes practicing. Who saw his youth? Who follows him? No one, right? The 2 men that love each other for the sake of Allah, depart for the sake of Allah. Nobody knows about the love, but they love for the sake of Allah. The man who ran away from the woman who called him towards zina, right? Again, he's not going to speak about it, but that's the reason why it goes Jannah. The hand that gives sadaqah and the left hand doesn't even know what it means. It's so secretly nobody knows. The man who sits in secrecy, fadat aina, right? He's a khalian. He's sitting in secrecy and then he sheds tears, or the woman that sheds tears in the depths of some secret night, whatever it was, day or night, but they did it out of the fear of Allah. Nobody knows about it. They go to Jannah. Now, this whole social media is the total opposite.
Yeah.
Because it's everything in the face.
Yeah.
Everything you have to show. And people have gone so crazy, man. I mean, why would you want to advertise your tawaf?
Mm-hmm.
You're in ibadah. Why are you sitting there reading Quran and wanting the whole world to, okay, fine, if you're doing it for ta'aleem or for education purposes, I understand. But why would you want to always be there in front of the camera and always reading for the whole world live? Why? It's ibadah at the end of the day, man. Okay, we do certain things for ta'aleem, for education, but why are you always advertising iftar? You're advertising you're selling salah, and somebody took a picture of you, and then you put that on social media in front of the Kaaba, doing 2 rakats. Why, man?
It's riya.
It's riya, right? Which is the opposite of why would Allah would accept your ibadah. But anyway, that's my little rant. Sorry.
No, but Shaykh, I think it's relevant to the next kind of question I wanted to ask. But it's to do with social media.
Yeah.
Because you did become, and you are still prominent on social media. But I think there's a difference, and the difference is, for someone who's coming from a Darul Uloom background, a traditional classical kind of ālimiyya background, and of course you have the the educational psychology as well. But I think maybe you've broken through some ice because the way you deliver the message, with jokes, a way that's relevant to the youth. It's not something that you would normally act, maybe now it's become a bit more normalized, but initially not something that was really you would see from someone of a classical kind of tradition. And so, how did you kind of develop the...
Well, I'll be honest with you. First, I never used to joke.
Okay, right. Yeah, so this is what we...
I never used to joke.
Yeah.
In the lectures and stuff, I used to be quite serious.
Yeah.
And then one day, I'm doing it for I think it was almost like 15 years or 16, because I started from the days we were doing cassettes.
Okay, mashallah.
Right? So we're going back in Stone Age.
Yeah. Some people don't know what a cassette is.
People don't know what cassette is, right? So I remember when I first was doing, they used to record on cassette and distribute them, right? Then came the CDs, then came the MDs, then came YouTube, and that's why we went through. It's our dinosaur, if you like, right? So what happened is, I think about one day I was sitting with my brother, my own blood brother. I was sitting across the dining table, and he goes, you're so serious, man, when you got behind the camera or behind these lectures. You're so serious. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, when you're home and when you're with me and when you're with the others, he said, you got this like personality where you can laugh and joke and whatever. He said, normal. It's not like you're trying to be a prankster or a kind of a fool or whatever. But it's like, you naturally will give the energy and the vibe. But when you go to lectures, you don't do any of that. I said, why? Why not? I thought to myself, okay, that's the point. He goes, look, if it comes out naturally, like if it's natural, right? So anyway, so what I thought, okay, let me give it a try. Like if it naturally comes out or something, like, not that I'm planning, whatever joke, right? Then what I noticed this, as I first started my durus, in my when I was teaching at Safar Academy, I started to crack a few jokes and see how it goes. What I noticed is that because of the joke, wherever you crack the joke, they remembered the joke, and then they remembered the lesson that was attached to the joke.
Okay.
So as long as they remember that, they remember the thing. So now I thought to myself, you know what? That's kind of good in the purpose that it. So I'm not there to joke and laugh a lot, but it helps for them to learn or to keep in the mind what was actually said. So then I did more, but then there's a danger to it as well, which is that if the joke is taken out of context, it can put you into serious trouble. And some people don't get it. And some people think that you're a joker, as in they don't want to listen to you anymore, right? And I've had all that. Then the trolls come along as well. And sometimes the worst is when you have the Daily Mail kind of, the short cutouts people make, and they make that 1 minute go viral, and you said a joke in there, but you know what? They're not getting the rest of the 2 hours that you said. And and there was some that went out, and I'm thinking, Ya Allah, I really hope that I'm getting into trouble with this, with the people of knowledge, with the people of, because the ulama will then say, what's happening? Is he saying this joke for this reason and not that reason? So anyway, alhamdulillah, I've survived it so far, and hopefully, some fool doesn't, start cutting things out and putting him, in the wrong places without any context or whatever, right? But that's one thing. But then I want to add one other thing to that, which is, our great Salaf, the pious, the predecessors, they said that when we first started this, then we had some riyah in it, we had some ostentation in it. But as you go along, then you kind of get the ikhlas, or you sort of shrug off the riyah and so on. So I think we all have to go through that. But the other day, somebody came to me and I was actually telling someone, listen, you're an imam, you're doing all these durus. I said, just tell someone just to have the camera there so that these lessons can go for your community and maybe for the wider world. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I said, okay, fine. I understand you don't want to do that. And by the way, for the listeners, there are imams out there that have more knowledge than all your social guys, media guys combined, but they're not known to anybody. And they still exist today in almost every town that we look, every city you go to, they exist. But honestly, and it's a shame that these youth don't know about them. Anyhow, so he said to me, how do you navigate through social? How do you get? Because he goes, the camera's going to be on you, and people are going to be then giving you the likes and this and that. I said, the key thing is why you're doing it. I said, if you're doing it for the people, then you're going to notice that you're going to be left with the people in the end. Which means that on the Day of Judgment, you're probably going to be standing with those people, but not with Allah, right? One of the key things Shaykh Fadlan says to me, he said, when you give a lecture, he said, correct your intention 3 times. Once before you do it, once in the middle of you doing it, and once at the end. So in the beginning, you say, I'm doing this for Allah's sake. In the middle, you say to yourself that I'm still doing it for Allah's sake, so keep the focus. And in the end, you say, I did it for Allah's sake. Now, he goes, when people come to you and they will give you comments and they will say, MashaAllah, Barakallah feek, all that, right? Every one of those, he goes, you better have your heart saying, if it wasn't for the tawfiq of Allah, you couldn't do a single thing. He gave you the tongue, he gave you the knowledge, he gave you the intelligence, he gave you this, he gave you the ilm, he gave you the knowledge, and he made you say it in a certain way. And he said, all those thanks, they belong to Allah. So he said, you better get onto the musalla, do 2 rakats and thank the one that made you do it because it wasn't yours. So this was an early thing that he gave me while I was studying with him. And he said, you better always check where your heart is after you gave it. Because if it goes with people by the end, then Allah's left you. Allah's left you. Taraktuhu wa amala, right? I leave him and I leave his action with him. But if he stays with Allah, then you find Allah. Now, the other interesting part is, what people don't realize is this whole thing about social media and this whole thing about, fame, right? It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
The same sword that you can fight with is the same sword that can kill you, which means the higher you go, the more risk you're at of falling from that height to the ground. Now, I don't know if you follow certain celebrities, certain people, may Allah forgive all of us and protect all of us, right? It might not even be your fault. It might be your fault, right? There are certain people who go so high and then all of a sudden something comes out. And their worst thing is this, Sheikh. I don't know if you noticed this, right? The very people that were clapping because you were climbing the ranks and going high, they're the very same people clapping because you fell down from the mountain. They're the same people clapping and watching you fall. And they're talking about you and how disgusting you are. I've even seen this, Sheikh. I don't know if you've seen this, right? People dying to get a selfie of some celebrity, so Islamic celebrity, people dying to sit next to him and selfie. And when the scandal or whatever comes out, people are deleting those. People say, oh, you got that, you took a photo. Yeah, I did, but I didn't know about I didn't seem like that. Right? Yeah, he was a different person then. They're trying to shrug you off. They're trying to put you under their shoes. So what you got to look at is your real people that really, are with you. Only a handful of people. Only a handful. And the people that you cannot really have near you or trust and, is only a very few selected people out of all the hundreds that you see. Because really, all in all, end of the day, what matters is not the platform you had or the thousands of followers or hundreds of thousands or millions of followers you had. End of the day is qabul. A lot of people don't understand the difference between the thing that our teachers taught us is qabiliyya and qabul. So qabil is that you are somebody who's got the capabilities and who's got the competence to do a certain job. But qabul is when Allah says, okay, you know what, I love your work, so I'm going to accept it. So you could do 1,000 rakats. And so you can show that I did 1,000 rakats or, I don't know, 10 Quran khatams, whatever, or 100. But you got the numbers, but you never got the qabul. And one man can do 2 rakats. And that could be so loving to Allah. Allah says, I accept you. So what's the point of you having 1,000 when none of it got accepted in the end? But those 2 could be worth another person's 1,000. Do you understand? So anyway, Allah.
So Sheikh, the benefits that I've taken from that, number one, the constant understanding of one's heart, being aware of what's happening in my own heart and being true and sincere to myself. And because it's very easy, for example, for a person to go online and I'm being accepted and I am sincere and I am this, but no, if you're really sincere, you need to be really sincere and monitor the heart. And the second, Sheikh, the risk attached to the fame. And the third, again, Sheikh, just to bring it back to the point, the importance of tarbiyah and the murabbi, because, you referred back to your teacher and the benefit and, having a close circle and, people to hold you accountable. So, alhamdulillah.
I'm going to say 2 points on this.
Yeah.
So one is that my ustad, Shaykh Fadl Rahim, he passed away. 2015, rahimahullah. But since 2006, I've had another Shaykh in Bangladesh who I go and see every year, and I'm in regular contact with him, and I see him as the one that could put me in place if I go out of line. One of the biggest problems that we've got with these people on, the famous people out there, if Islamically they're doing things, is they don't have that murabbi.
Yes.
They don't have that person who can put them in line. We all can go out of line now and again. We're human, right? But you need someone or a group of people to say, listen, guy, come back in line. You're getting taken off the road by these people and what they're saying. Because, end of the day, when hundreds and thousands of people are saying to you that you're so good, you're so great, you're doing the right thing, it plays on your ego. You kind of feel that, but let's just go to the Quran. Qarun, right? Qarun was blessed with so much wealth. And then if you look in the Quran, there's 2 statements there. Well, the first one is, they looked at him when he came out, فَخَرَجَ عَلَى قَوْمِ فِي زِينَتِهِ. قال الذين يريدون الحياة الدنيا يا ليت لنا مثل ما أوتي قارون. The people who wanted the world, they said, oh, if only we had the same as what Qarun had. And they're looking at him. But the people who were, who had the knowledge, they said, وَيْلَكُمْ ثَوَابُ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لِمَنْ آمَنَ. Right? You better be, you better know that the reward you get in the akhirah is much better than this dunya. Anyway, they're trying to talk to them. Now, what happens when Qarun gets swallowed into the earth? What does it say?
Yeah.
What did they say? وَيْكَأَنَّ اللَّهِ. They say, oh my God, had that been me, I would have been swallowed as well. So now you're saying, oh, I'm lucky I wasn't him. I'm fortunate I wasn't in his position. So yesterday you're looking at if only you were Qarun. And then now you're like, oh, I don't want to be because he was swallowed into the earth. That's one thing, right? So all these things that people have or whatever, it means nothing. So, when you said about I'm accepted, as in so many people are accepted, you're never accepted and you never know you're accepted حتى يأتيك اليقين, right? Until death comes. When death comes and you go to the other side and then you see Allah says, well, I've accepted. Then you know. I don't care how many dreams you see. I don't care how many people support you, follow you, say whatever. It doesn't mean anything. You can have certain signs and you can take a good thing from those signs, right? Fine. But you better not feel that you're there. That's one thing. The second thing that I was going to say is I said to that person who asked me about this, I said, listen, your true position with Allah is when you are alone and the opportunity of sin arises. When you're completely alone. Your true thing is when you're in the depths of the night or in the darkness and you just you and Allah, and that's, what do you do then? What do you do when you can sin but there's no humans that are watching you? Because the Quran said, يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ النَّاسِ وَلَا يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَهُوَ مَعَهُمْ إِذْ يُبَيِّتُونَ مَا لَا يَرْضَى مِنَ الْقَوْلِ. Allah says, they're hiding from people, but they're not hiding from me. When I'm with them when they sin. And they're saying things which are not, likable to me, but they're saying it, but I'm with them. So they're doing this because they're hiding from people. It's all about people. So in the end, when all people have died and everything's gone back to, zero, and you're in front of Allah, what matters then is whether, Allah Azza wa Jalla is with us or not.
Barakallahu fikum, Shaykh.
No, just a final question for myself, and I really wanted to ask you this question.
Yeah, go on.
So you mentioned in regards to the power of education, the effect it's had on families, and I see that Safar publication, Safar Academy, it's like they've given food to the plate of madaris. So many madaris are using the Safar publications. I wanted to ask, what do you see for the future in terms of the objectives of not Safar Academy, but all madaris, and especially in regards to the genocide which is going on in Gaza? How can madaris play a part, in regards to, it could be aid, it could be in regards to using their voice, but yeah, just in regards to this, inshallah.
Okay, look, so it's a wider thing, because yes, we are very, very much affected by what is going on in Gaza at the moment and Palestine in general. But what we shouldn't take our eyes off is every other, mishappening and every other misfortune or whatever, zulm or oppression and cruelty that's going on across the world in many other different parts of the world, right? And what we shouldn't is, yes, we should do our best in terms of for the people of Palestine. But it's not just about Palestine. I think it should be about the Ummah, right? So we need to get people that like the Ummah. The Ummah, we're one big unit, of brothers and sisters. And we will look after one another in all of these numbers of ways. And you help the Ummah in all of these ways, right? So today it's Gaza, yes. Today it's Palestine, yes. But we never forget, every person of this Ummah is important. So it could be any other country tomorrow. It could be our own country, right? And I think the one thing that people really don't, this is one of the reasons why Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was Abu Bakr. Because where everybody else was donating and giving to the things that they were seeing, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was donating there, helping them, and also helping all the ones that nobody could see. That's what made him Abu Bakr. That's what made him above everybody else. So he gave in all these other places, but he would always look out for that widow, look out for that person who nobody knew, nobody was even looking after, nobody was doing anything for, right? So we are an ummah that does this. Now, in terms of institutions,
in the UK,
I think what needs to really two things I would say, because it's a very sensitive topic. I'm also giving a lecture at the moment on this, the future of Palestine from the Quran and Sunnah. Inshallah, it will be recorded and be uploaded, inshallah, in the near future. I think there's two things that are really important. And a lot of people don't even look at this, right? The way it should be looked at. Number one is, look at it from a historical point of view, right? So we're now going back before Isa alayhi salam. We're going all the way back to Musa alayhi salam. We're going to Musa alayhi salam. And then what you want to say, if I can give I don't know if I can give a little synopsis and full this, right? So you look at Musa alayhi salam, and then you look at Musa alayhi salam, the Banu Israel. So you explain who the Banu Israel, which is the children of Jacob, which is Yaqub alayhi salam children. These are the Banu Israel, and their children of the Banu Israel. Then you look at the Banu Israel later on. Sorry, if you go before Musa alayhi salam, right? His Banu Israel really starts from Yaqub alayhi salam, who is the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, right? So that's Yusuf's brothers and Yusuf alayhi salam. They are the fathers of the Israel, so the Banu Israel, right? So their children and their children are the Banu Israel. So what then happens is Yusuf alayhi salam passes away. Then you have Musa alayhi salam that he's sent to rescue the Banu Israel from the slavery of Egypt and deliver them. Right, so then he crosses the north part of the Red Sea, right? So cross over the side. Then there's the whole thing of Mount Sinai and all of that, right? Okay, but they're told they're going to be given a land, right? So you need to look at this. It's in the Quran as Ya qawmi idkhulul arda al-muqaddasata allati kataba Allahu lakum. It's there, but the land was given to them with conditions, and then you need to look into the biblical references to say what are the conditions. So the conditions are very clear. The conditions that was said to them. I mean, I've got a whole lecture. I'm just trying to very briefly say them. So it's very clear from the Bible that God says that, the land belongs to me, and you're going to be on this land by following my statutes, my ordinances, and thou shalt, one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, right? All these kinds of there. And innocent blood shouldn't be shed. These are all in the biblical references, right? And then it says in there that if you were to, if the land is, that if you defiled, then let the land not vomit you out. It's very clear references in the Bible. And he was told that. Then what happens? Okay, they come with Musa alayhi salam. It's not Quran. What do? They don't take over. Two of them say, let's go, and the rest of them say, no, فَذْهَبْ أَنْتَ وَرَبُّكَ فَقَاتِلَ إِنَّا. You go and your Lord go and fight. This is also in the Bible. Anyway, he's sent to them to the open desert for 40 years. يَتِيهُونَ 40 سَنَةً for 40 years. Exodus in the Bible talks about this. Some say 38, some say 40 years, but more or less 40 years. Quran says 40 years, 40 years. Okay. What's really interesting is, if you look at some of the maps they've got of this big promised land, and you look at where they are as 40 years, they're in a place where this bigger map is, but they're within that. Hang on a minute. They've just been banished from the Holy Land. So how come they're within that other bigger map? Doesn't make sense. We need to show this to our children. Like, guys, look, get your perception right. Okay, fine. Then they go with Dawood alayhi salam. And they eventually, and they say again, قَتَلَ دَاوُودُ جَالُوتَ. It's in the Quran, David and Goliath. That's when they get in. That's when the thing starts, right? Where they got the King David, then got King Solomon, which is Dawood and Solomon. Okay, they are ruling. But then what happens is, there's violations. When the violations happens, the land vomits them out, right? And then you look at the real map of how much it is that they ruled, you get an idea of where, the Holy Land is. Anyway, I don't want to get into too deep in there. Anyway, let's go from then all the way till Isa alayhi salatu salam. When Isa alayhi salam comes, how many times does the violation things happen? And how many times does the land vomit things out? Anyway, you go after Isa, 200 years before Isa alayhi salam, there's a massive thing. 70 years after Isa alayhi salam, there's another massive one. The Quran talks about it. لَتُفْسِدُنَّ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَّتَيْنِ وَلَتَعْلُنَّ عُلُوًّا كَبِيرًا فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ وَعْدُ أُولَاهُمَا. First time it's going to happen. Second time it's going to happen. Okay, I don't want to get into much of it. Okay, that all happens. Then they decide, the Banu Israel decide, that they better not do this again, because every time they make it exclusive and they don't follow God's laws, or they don't follow the things that would give, like the land came with certain promises from God. It's called the ahd, right? Mithaq, an ahd, right? قضينا بني إسرائيل. So we gave them clear instructions of how to be, right, to the Bani Israel. Anyway, he talk about Allah. Then actually one really interesting part. And again, I don't think anyone looks at this like this, which is, let's just talk about the future. So we know what's going on in the current time. You can talk about the current time, fine, but what's more important is talk about the future, because our Prophet ﷺ must have mentioned this area, but you don't find Palestine there. The name that was known in the biblical times is Canaan, right? And the question they came to Rasulullah about Yusuf is, how did Yusuf's family go from Canaan to Egypt? That's when the whole Surah Yusuf came down. Now what's important is, it's not about Canaan, it's about Asham. Asham, because Rasulullah mentions a lot of ahadith about Sham. And Sham is not just Syria. Sham is the whole of Syria, the whole of Lebanon, the whole of Palestine, the whole of Jordan, right? Part of Saudi Arabia, part of Iraq in there, southern part of Turkey in there. It's a massive place. And then what you're going to do is, you're going to take that map and cross it over the map that is being sort of said that this is what we're supposed to have. And you start looking, you say, wait, hang on a minute. You say, well, Rasulullah said, إِذَا وَقَعَتِ الْفِتَنِ, when the tribulations will come, he said, go into Sham. So many hadith. Sham has the Abdal. Sham has, because of them, because of du'as, you're going to get nusra, you're going to get help and so on. And he's telling us going to Sham. Sham is including the whole process. And then there's a hadith that says, part of my ummah, they're always going to be on haqq. لا يضرهم من خذلهم. No one's going to be able to put them down. Whoever tries to disgrace them, abase them, shame them, they can't. And then they were asked by the Sahaba. The Sahabas mentioned, Allah, tell us who these people are. And he says, the Bayt, which is Bayt al-Maqdis, wa aknafuha. He said, the surroundings of that. What does that mean? That means this tribulation is being talked about right now, that we see right now, talked about by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he's saying they're going to stand on the truth. No one's going to be able to make them wither. Which means what? Which means they're never going to lose it. Like they can lose parts of it, but they're not going to lose all of it. All right? And then when you look at the Sham map and the background, you say, but all these ahadith talking about Imam Mahdi, pre-Imam Mahdi, all the way up to Dajjal, every time you see Muslims are in the lands. Muslims are going frequently. Imam Mahdi is going in, out, in, out. There's big, wars and things are happening. But he says, in these lands, Sham is happening again in Sham, which is what? Which is all of these lands, including Palestine, right? And then you get the hadith about Dajjal not being able to go into Masjid al-Aqsa. In one hadith, he says Masjid al-Haram, Makkah. Another one, so basically Makkah and Medina, which really literally means the Haram and a bit of outside space, and Masjid Nabawi and bit of outside space. But then a third hadith talks about Masjid al-Aqsa. And then you start asking yourself a question, hang on a minute, if they're going to take over whatever place it is and they're going to make it all, I don't know, whatever building and whatever exclusivity, how come Dajjal can't go inside there? So if you look pre-Imam Mahdi, Muslims are all in there. At Imam Mahdi's time, he's praying in the Damascus Masjid and Isa comes there, which means Muslims are there in Sham. His whole empire is based from the heart of Asham. Imam Mahdi's, right? And then after Imam Mahdi, you find Dajjal can't go into Masjid al-Aqsa. Now you do the maths and you come up with a result, which means, Ala inna nasrullahi qareeb. Fathun min Allahi wa nasrun qareeb. The help of Allah and the things that come soon. Why? Because I'll tell you one thing, if you look in history, if you study history, then it tells you about the future. And one of the greatest things about the history is it tells you how long these type of people have come into power and stayed in power. Mm-hmm. It's not about just coming into power, it's how long you stayed in power. And what was the reason why you declined Cain? And most of it, what it points out is their own internal conflict that led to the downfall. So I will just say that much, leave it that. But one of the biggest things we need is we need to tell the Muslim Ummah, not just the children, about the history, about the future, and then you can see where we are in the middle.
Barakallahu feekum, Shaykh, and we'll conclude with that, inshallah, please. Barakallahu feekum, Shaykh.
Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe for more.